Okay, we're live.
Hey, Andre.
Um, hey, how you doing? I should really actually have I mean, not web page test. We call that Twitch open. Yeah, I should open up Twitch, I think.
Is
Uh,
it not over there yet?
I mean, it probably is. I just don't have the I don't have the window open. But I mean, people would probably log in and I'd see their comments, so I'm not super worried. But sometimes I kind of want to see Twitch at the same time. But it does not matter because this is being recorded.
Nice. We need like some sort of dramatic intro opener music, I think.
It's funny you should say that because I've been dabbling around with setting that up, and I was looking for the least expensive option. And it involved my older laptop, but the laptop is a little too old, I think.
Hmm.
And you know, I don't know. I got to go look into that. Anyhow, we're here. We're live. Scott, good afternoon once again.
Andre, good afternoon to you. How goes?
Merci. How you doing, dude?
Doing well.
Okay.
It's been a fun couple of weeks here at WebPageTest. A lot of
It
things
has
happening.
been a lot of things as usual. It's like nonstop over here.
Hmm.
Um, First thing I'd like to say is uh, it's the first day of fall today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt it. I went to get a loaf of bread and I was like, "Oh, this breeze is cool."
Hmm.
Have you been out the door yet today?
Yeah. Thunderstorms here in New York City. At least this morning. Now it's just cloudy, but
Okay.
it's supposed to get cold this weekend, from what I heard.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
now
I
everybody doesn't need to check the weather. Got you
it,
covered.
it was a little shocking today. I felt like Mother Nature woke up and just went switch, and it was just cool. And it was windy, and I was like, "Wow, this it's actually here." So,
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, whatever. I had a great summer. I don't know about yours. It just felt a good, like a pretty good summer. So I think I enjoyed
Yeah,
the good
same.
weather. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Bring on the fall.
Yeah, I
Good.
mean, I have a sweater I like wearing, and I don't mind like light jackets. Like
Right.
I have one on right now. I don't know if anyone could tell, but yeah, I don't know. It's fall. It's here, but fall is actually what I like to call the other new year, and we'll get into that in a hot minute. But as you mentioned, we've been pretty busy the last couple weeks here, and we'll get into that in a hot minute. But the first thing I want to do is go through, the usual intro here at WebPage Test. Awesome. Well, that's where we're going to start, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to WebPage Test Live, where on Thursdays we like to talk about all things WebPage Test and things that we're working on, which we'll get into as we just mentioned. But we are here as usual just to discuss the current happenings in our team. And today we have a special guest as always. It's always nice to have Scott with me here.
Oh, it's good to be on. Appreciate it.
Oh man, you're very welcome. But of course, since we are talking about web pitch tests, we'd like to remind you that it is a tool for the performance minded, and it's free to use. You just go to well, let me see. If you go to webpitchtest.org, and I'll just pull that up on the banner right here, and you could get yourself a free account, and you can start testing away. And we do have a premium offering if you want to get into the entrails, but by all means, go and check that out. Something else that we want to mention is that we do have our own YouTube channel as well. So all the recordings from WebPage Test Live, which you're attending right now, will migrate and find their way over there. So if you go to YouTube, look up WebPage Test, you'll find us there. In fact, we do have a little bit.ly for a lot of different things. So if you go to bit.ly/channel dash webpage test, you'll be able to catch us there. Some of you may remember a few weeks ago, Scott and I did this really interesting show called Community Submissions. and we looked at some of the sites that you're looking at, because as I've always said, and we always really preach over at WebPageTest, is like you have to be curious. You have to sort of look under the hood, see what's going on. And we took submissions from the community, and it was actually a pretty fun show. So this is sort of like ongoing. If you have any site that you're looking at that you found was pretty interesting, and you'd love for us to sort of feature it or take a look at it, look at it together, pardon me, let us know. If you go to that address right there, bit.ly/WPT submission, you'll be presented a very quick form. You'll be able to input the web page test URL, and let us know why you thought it was pretty interesting. And we'd like to have one of these shows again. It was a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, that episode was fun. I think we audited 5 sites or
Yeah,
so in about 40 minutes. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it's a pretty useful episode to look up on our YouTube. I think we found a good observation about each of the case studies. So yeah, that was
yeah.
fun.
It was super fun, and I actually made I did something similar last week with a group, and you know didn't go live, but I do remember the site. Actually, I saved it in my history, something that you could do when you sign up for WebPageTest. And I definitely will keep it handy the next time we do this show. So hopefully we'll do that in the next, I don't know, month or so. I'll figure it out.
Cool.
Something else I wanted to mention is Scott. I don't know. Does this ring a bell?
Yeah, that would be the Event Apart conference. I'll be speaking there soon.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, the Denver conference coming up on October. Let's see, the 10th. There it is.
Yes.
Yeah, Event Apart, always a good conference. They get such a good lineup. Lots of speakers from different disciplines and all over the world, and yeah, it's great. So if you're in that area, I hope to see you there.
Yeah. And the info's on the site. Scott's going to be speaking there, so definitely go in and check that out. If you're in the area. And as you said, a super, super duper awesome conference. Speaking of conferences, actually, I forgot one, but I'll talk about that afterwards. We wanted to mention Performance Now, which is going to take place the end of October. And it's the only performance conference, I think, worldwide, really. And it's coming back after 2 years of hiatus for obvious reasons. And WebPageTest will have a full team there. Scott, I believe you'll be there as well.
Yeah, it'll be nice. I spoke at that conference a few years ago. I think it was 2019, maybe. It's such a good show. Most conferences have one or two at most talks on performance, and if that's the sort of thing that you work on day to day, then this show is really your thing. Plus, I mean, the location. I mean, Amsterdam is just one of my favorite places to be. It's such a great city. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to
See
be a
you
lot
there.
of fun. I will be there, and yeah, I'm really excited. To be honest, it's going to feel like a school reunion. I was telling someone, a lot of people who kind of know each other and haven't seen each other in a while, and some people are going to meet for the first time. But regardless, it is going to be a great meeting of the minds. And a lot of companies and teams are going to be there. I was actually, not to waste too much time, but I was actually looking at the list of attendees because it is public, and some have chosen to share their the companies they work for. New Balance is going to be there, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah,
Um,
cool.
I mean, I don't know if they're going to be. I mean, I know they're going to have technical conversations on their site. I wonder if they're going to have some technical, as we call it in the industry, PK, product knowledge, on their footwear, because I will ask them. But I thought that was interesting. And you also know Mr. Henry, the what I believe is sort of like a vacuum company or something like that.
Mm.
but they're going to be there, and I found that super interesting. So, yeah, I'm excited, but I'm equally excited for what's happening the night before. So, if you're going to be in Amsterdam on the 26th, because the conference starts on the 27th, um, WebPageTest, Google, and a company out of Amsterdam. I cannot pronounce their name, but shout outs Vera. Um, we are organizing a pre-event called Link Rel Preload, and it's going to feature speakers from, well, it's a community event, so it's going to have obviously attended by people in the area, people attending Perf Now, but also we're going to have some lightning talks, which is going to be super duper interesting. And we're actually going to have a little bit of a quiz as well. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you're going to be in Amsterdam for Perf Now, definitely check this out on the 26th. I know it says October 27th, but um, with the time zones, it's all bizarre. But it's going to be on the 26th. And you only have until, I think, the day before, which is the 25th, to RSVP, because we are putting a cap on the attendance for safety reasons, actually, and space reasons. Yeah,
Nice.
those are the pre-announcements. And now we're going to get into the pièce de résistance, as we like to call it in the fine language of Molière. We're going to talk about something that you've worked on for the last little while. We're going to talk about this course that we've released over our webpage test called the Lightning Fast Web Performance. And Scott, I believe you're the author.
Yeah, yeah, this is pretty exciting. This was a course that's been around a little while. It was something that I put together. Originally, the material was for workshops and for in-person groups, about 50 people I'd teach each time. And it was sort of a lecture format that catered well, I think maybe even catered a little better to online lecture format that could reach a wider audience. So I had produced it before I had joined the team here at WebPageTest. And it's really great that Catchpoint was interested in bringing it into their learning materials as of this year. So that happened this spring, and last week we just pushed it online, and it's updated. Most sections have been updated where necessary to make sure the recommendations are fresh, and I pulled some things out that maybe aren't quite as useful now as they were a little while ago. Make room for new stuff. So yeah, it's up. It's free on the WebPageTest site in a new learning section, which is kind of a hint at more to come. I think we have plans to expand on that as more of a a learning academy sort of thing. But this is the first piece of content we've offered, and yeah, it's exciting for me. I think the aim of this course was to to make performance knowledge more accessible to audiences that have been I don't know, slower to come by it in the past, because all of it is so aimed at developer audiences. And this course is very technical too, but I think it's introduced in a more holistic way to try to you know help anyone in any role on a team understand the importance of performance, and even particular metrics, why you should care about improving them. So yeah, that's kind of the idea. I'd recommend it to non-developers if they're interested in getting up to speed on what all this metric talk is all about.
Absolutely. And, it's funny because, off camera, we were talking about this, and, I want to get sort of your take on it, and I'll probably share mine as well. Do you remember when and how you got into performance and what you had been sort of like consuming at the time to sort of bring yourself up to speed?
Yeah. Well, I think my interest in performance came around the time that, the iPhone and other, types of mobile devices were gaining the capability to really browse the same web that the rest of, computers were using, and all of the concerns that automatically came from that new moment, right, where, suddenly we need to reformat, uh, the layout of this site so it works on different screen sizes and all of that. And I think in the process of doing all of that, which I was already instantly, uh, interested in, just, for nothing else, like it was my job to make websites work on whatever device people want to view them on. Um, what naturally came as a result of that was, oh, wow, we can't really, continue using the same practices that we've been using for desktop computers now that, we have all these new constraints. Connection
Hmm.
speeds are slower, and there's a cap on the bandwidth that people are browsing with, and maybe they'll lose their ability to browse that month if they run out of data. So they're very conscious of that. And some of those things have changed since then. I think um, you know overall worldwide speeds are really fast now generally,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and we sort of have new problems that we've invented, I think, in a lot of ways for ourselves by saying, oh, the network's fast, let's throw even more data at the device, and suddenly the performance problem is on the device and not the network. Um, but I think, that was what captured my interest. And I think the things we talk about now are different problems entirely. But yeah, that was definitely the era for me. How about you?
As you mentioned the iPhone, and I see this comment right here from Gilberto, I believe, um, who remembers the BlackBerry browser from that
Mhm.
time. You
Absolutely.
know,
Mhm.
I thank you for that comment because BlackBerry being from just outside of Toronto, it was certainly an interesting device. I had it. I had one. I forget the model. It was an interesting device, but uh, the mobile browser or the mobile device is what got me into it as well. And I remember it like it was yesterday when uh, the first Retina screen iPhone was introduced, and I remember thinking to myself like, "What is a Retina screen?" You know, and then I was sort of like looking it up, and after I understood what that meant, and the whole like remember at the time it was like, hey, when you create your images, you're gonna best practices was to put like 1x 2x or x1 x2
Yes.
x3, and I remember doing a quick little demo, and I was like, oh my god, it was like this very big aha moment. And then, like yourself, I was immediately thinking of like, man, the data this is going to consume is incredible. And that really led me down this path of just like reading more, and I've talked about meetups and the importance of meetups. I remember starting to attend the performance meetup in Toronto, which I ended up taking over, and then just getting the documentation, as much as I could, reading books, buying them, the ebook version, just because shipping to Canada was always kind of complicated and stuff. So I thought the ebook was just going to be as good, if not better, because everything was stored on my iPad.
Hmm.
And then just I loved that I could just sort of like highlight stuff and whatever. Um, and I've said this often before, and I'll say it again. I think a company like O'Reilly and their Velocity conference really kind of set me up. The content that they provided alongside the books and following the authors online really helped out. And I bought books from a book apart as well, including yours, sir.
Ah, appreciate that.
Ebook. So, it's funny because I think you'd done potentially a stream around the book when it was being introduced, and
Hmm.
I always remember you had a shelf with like 12 copies of it or something, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get it, sir. Like buy my book. Yes, we understand.
Yeah,
So I thought that was
right.
interesting.
Yep. Got to
Um,
do that promo tour.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hey, it was necessary. But the point I'm trying to make is, the kind of the content that was out there was just, it was perfect timing. And I do realize it was a period in time where a lot of the developers who are out right now didn't experience. So it was almost, perfect that WebPageTest was able to release a sort of a new version, or updated version of your course, dating from last year, for the community to sort of enjoy, and sort of bring themselves up to speed, like you said, for anyone who wasn't really well versed in performance. What's all this conversation around metrics and
Mhm.
LCP and all that stuff. And so it could not be more timely. And I've said this before, and I'm sure you could agree. Anyone interested in performance, there has been no better time to be in performance right now. It's important, and the documentation uh, available has not always been as sort of like prominent and sort of developer facing. And since I brought up the importance of performance, why do you think perf matters? Because I've done your course again. It's been fantastic. I'd love to sort of expose or talk about some of the chapters we'll be sort of going through in your course. So why does perf matter?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of ways to approach that question. I personally tend to go towards, first thinking of performance as somewhat of a subset of accessibility just as a whole. And I mean,
Mhm.
not necessarily like, the specifics of any particular kind of accessibility, like, you know, making, making sites work better for assistive technology, that particular kind, but more just broadly to start with, just the idea of access, in general. And I think all of us sort of rely on performance as sort of the first consideration of being able to access anything in the first place. Um, and tied tightly with how fast something loads, it's how reliably it loads at all, and how resilient it is. All of these concepts, I think, are sort of the first step towards being able to use anything that we produce and offer as a service on the web. So it's critical to me. I mean, it's like, for a lot of services on the web, good performance is a huge deal. It could be even something like life or death if you're using a service that's that important. So that's the kind of stuff that keeps me going. Moving a metric by 100 milliseconds isn't necessarily what gets me up every day out of bed. I think making something dramatically faster to access on a phone, particularly if you're on a typical device, maybe not the highest end device, and maybe a typical connection. Maybe you're on the train trying to get somewhere in the city, like all these very real world constraints that come into how we actually browse the web when we're not just in a lab typing into our computers. Those are all real world scenario performance issues where I think we see the pain of a lot of the practices that we use today. Um, and just yesterday, I wrote a blog post on the WebPageTest site that gets into this, I think, a lot, because we're in a 4G, 5G world right now. Like, for the most part, 4G is worldwide and pretty reliable, and still performance is atrocious on a lot of sites on a mobile device. And it's kind of amazing to me that you know, network speeds should have fixed our problem if we just
Mhm.
kept doing what we were doing. But as network speeds improve, we continually make the web more complex, and sort of, you know, neutralize the benefits that we would otherwise get. And I think, that really shows in a lot of the patterns that are popular today for serving a website, and just how much complexity we often put in front of our content, and just how much that impacts just being able to see the content sooner. And it's many seconds, or even, in the case of that blog post, we're talking about looking at spinner images for 14 seconds sometimes, and I see this every day on my phone, even in New York City on a good phone. So, that's why I think performance matters. I mean, if you have barriers like that between your user and the content you're trying to get to them, uh, they'll go elsewhere, or they'll have problems. It affects their impression of you at the very least. All of that.
Absolutely. And you've made all fantastic points, and it's absolutely true. We've increased bandwidth and speeds and whatnot, but people tend to forget that it's still about latency. You could have all the bandwidth in the world. You could have like what seemingly is amazing speed on paper, but there's latency involved. And I talked about this, I think, very recently, just to remind people that you know there was two articles actually. I brought both up. I think online. Ilya Grigorik had it was like about a 10-year-old post. He talked about how bandwidth was not the solution. It's tackling latency, and there's a graph of showing how all this bandwidth was increasing, but the latency was never, at some point it just never hit zero. Just as a reminder. And I know in the course actually you mentioned a very famous blog post by I'm looking at him, Chris Zacharias, over at Imagix, and the whole Feather project over at Google. And uh, obviously, if you take the course, folks, which is a free one, you'll be able to hear about it. But there's a blog post somewhere. I might find it posted. But they talk about how they tried to solve some of the sort of like bandwidth and sort of front page challenges they were having with the web page test. I'm sorry, the YouTube front page. They want to, I think, drop it down to like 100K. And when they did that, finally, they found like just massive bottlenecking. And what was essentially happening was that people were now able to access the site, whereas before it was just like a big no-no. And they were willing to wait, for content to come down the page.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Mm-hmm.
a very enlightening moment in the history
Yeah.
of development.
Yeah, I think that that post is frequently referenced in performance community circles, because it's a great example of how performance has an enabling effect, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you make your site lighter weight and more accessible, then suddenly you expose yourself to a wider audience, and maybe that audience has connection speeds that weren't able to even experience what you're offering before. So your median numbers go up as a result, and it looks like you have a degraded experience somehow, even though you improved performance. And that's not the case. You've made yourself available
Yep.
and accessible in ways that you weren't before. And that's kind of the whole, I mean, it's a perfect example of why performance matters and why I care about it. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, yeah, that one's great.
Yeah, it is a fantastic example, and it's one that it is kind of discussed in our performance circles. But it'd be great for people to sort of like I'll find it during the stream and post it. I know we also talk or you talk about in your course about metrics and what's fast. You talked about you just mentioned 100 milliseconds. That may not be what you necessarily will dive in on. Performance is still the big umbrella, a user experience. That example of the Feather project at YouTube was really a user experience story. So you want to talk about like what you feel like people should really look at when it comes to metrics?
Yeah, well, I mean, the course just kind of goes, one by one through the metrics that you're presented with in various tools. It's sort of neutral as far as the tooling. It started out that way with the course, and it remains that way, to the credit of, Catchpoint, its new owner. We've kept it that way as sort of a broad survey, I think, of performance tooling that includes WebPageTest, but also shows others like Page Speed Insights, for example, and Lighthouse, and all these other great tools that, frankly, I think should be used in combination. So you have a balanced look at things when you're testing performance, and they generally have standardized on a lot of the metrics that we offer in WebPageTest. So I go through them in the course and explain what each one means. First, just sort of defining them, and sort of just helping anyone, non-developer and developer alike, to just understand the importance of a moment. A lot of these are user perceived moments that we're expressing in a metric, just to make it easier to talk about. But if we say something like, start render, what we're really talking about is the first moment that it looks like something's happening visually when you're loading a web page, and that's a perceivable moment, right? So a lot of the metrics that we care about are perceivable in those ways. They sort of map to someone's perception of how things are going. I mean, ideally, there's not a lot of gap between those moments in a nice, quick performing site, and you don't have a whole lot of time to have different moods about each metric moment. But there's often a gap between some of the key metrics, and those gaps represent opportunities, I think, for very particular optimizations that you can later go on to make. So the course first defines those metrics, and then it follows up in a subsequent chapter with the sort of bottlenecks that contribute to each of those metrics being fast or slow. So if you find that your LCP, your largest contentful paint metric, is particularly high, maybe high enough that Google is flagging it as, this is going to affect your page rank. It's pretty slow. Well, then, there are actually optimizations that you can make to impact LCP specifically. And, some of those are just optimizing the metrics that come before that, like make sure FCP is fast before you get to the largest contentful paint. But some are very specific to LCP, like how images are requested, and using responsive images, and how you load your fonts and things like that. So so I think that's how metrics are addressed in the course, kind of going through them one by one. And then in the later chapters of the course, there are, it's sort of like a third pass through those metrics where it talks about specific fixes to the bottlenecks. So we kind of define the metric, define the problems that make that metric slow, and then talk about, well, here's how you fix it, right?
And you just mentioned that the being able to sort of like identify the problems, which you go through in the course, and obviously that comes in several forms, and which is why WebPageTest comes in so handy. And for anyone who's just not watched the stream before, and or might be new to the stream, on Thursdays we literally sit down and use WebPageTest and look through some random sites, because you'd be surprised at some of the hurdles that you'll see in sort of like loading a page. Once you sort of pop open the hood, aka use WebPageTest, and really kind of understand how the resource load is implemented. And that's how we sort of, being able to, solve an issue, you have to measure, and I talk about this all the time. You won't be able to sort of bring any site up to speed without starting with some measurements and using WebPageTest to indicate what is going on with, say, the core web vitals, the sort of three more or less well documented metrics that tend to create some of the challenges,
Hmm.
TBT, CLS, and obviously largest contentful paint, which we mentioned. And that's actually a metric that developers seem to struggle with the most through some of the data that's been made available to us. I'm actually going to show this article that we've discussed together very quickly, and I threw the link in the chat as well for those who want to read it. This is an article that's literally 10 years old. It'll turn 10, in fact, later on this year. Um, Very influential, in sort of showing people that even through what seems like a technical optimization, squeezing this, optimizing that, then you go live and realize there's more work to be done, and the user experience is absolutely atrocious, just because now people can actually put their hand on the doorknob, but they actually can't open the door yet, so you have more work to do. Worth reading. It's really a very well discussed blog post in the performance circles. It's one that has really had legs over the years. I remember seeing Mr. Zacharias speak for the first time. He's over at a image optimization company, or asset management company is what I should actually call it, called Imagix. Um, Obviously we talked about, IDing the problem, and, you talk about how to make things faster through the course as well. Um, in sort of like summary at the sort of conclusion of the course, like what do you talk about essentially?
Yeah, I think, by the way, is my muting okay? It looked
Uh,
like it got messed up.
I can hear
You can
you.
hear me. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the course goes through that final sort of section of addressing each metric bottleneck and recommending a fix. And then sort of goes a little beyond it to talk about repeat visits and longer session kind of performance, which is something that, I think some tools are just starting to address a little bit better than all of us have in the past. But um, you know, being able to measure follow-up visits instead of just the start visit, like a lot of the metrics we talk about are just about the initial page load, which is so critical. Um, but it's generally harder. It's a little more work to measure follow-up visits, and WebPageTest does it. Other tools are starting to do it as well, a little bit more. So that last section talks about optimizing for sort of the long hauler users of your site who were won over and actually stuck around. Make sure that browsing the site further than just landing on it remains fast by using different caching strategies, service workers, all those sorts of considerations. So yeah, and then there's just sort of a summary at the end that ties together, as you'd expect, all the things that the course covered.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think it aims to be pretty practical in that way.
That's what ideally the people who sign up for the course are going to get. Being able to um, sort of go through this course and use best practices. And at the very least, best practices will get you surprisingly pretty far when it comes to performance, because you'll find that once you get sort of comfortable and have this sort of auditing habit, sort of like the muscle memory of sort of jumping into web page tests and looking at sites, you'll see that for the most part best practices aren't always followed. And in fact, I'm going off memory, but the amount of sites across, like, say, about 15 million sites that the HTTP archive audits, I believe it's about like 40% or so in and around plus or minus a few percent that have, good core web vitals, so good LCP, good CLS, and good TBT.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so that right there shows you that there's room for improvement. We're
Hmm.
not saying that, all the sites are bad, but, we are trying to show you what what best practices look like.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, a lot of those sort of archive, year recap sort of studies tend to point at, median values, and sort of give you like a good average for how things are going. But sometimes it's also important to look at, you know, sites that are in the top 100 that we use every day, which are generally not even close to as fast, surprisingly, as as that median. The outliers are also popular, is kind of
yep,
what I'm getting at. Um, and a lot of sites that are in that doing really well medium are probably just static blog posts and stuff that haven't been touched in a long time.
yep,
um, and there's some projection there, but I think my blog post yesterday, for example, highlighted a bunch of sites that are in the top 20, um, that have some pretty easily observed performance issues, right? um, so yeah, I think overall, the course sort of follows this trend that I think WebPageTest has been aiming to address as well in our tooling, which is to make this information about what matters in performance more accessible and easier to understand, and better explained, less technical, at least
mhm,
at the surface.
mhm,
Um, I hope you'll see that reflected in WebPageTest itself. You run a test now, versus a couple of years ago. There's a lot more, uh, you know, explanatory text in the test result right away that doesn't necessarily assume what TTFB stands for, right?
mhm, mhm.
And I think that all that's very intentional. We're trying to spread the awareness of performance to a broader number of people on teams, because in general, most people on a team who have any impact on a website have the ability to impact its performance, right? Like, someone might recommend that a script that, tracks certain analytics is added to the site. Please add that tomorrow. And it introduces a regression in how quickly the site loads for everyone. The more people understand that, everything you change could have a positive or negative or no impact on performance, the better. So that's definitely the aim of the tooling and the course.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, ultimately, and you may have heard this refrain from myself and others on the team, we are certainly out to increase performance literacy. We realize that performance over the years, web performance specifically, has gotten a little bit complicated, but not so much so that with a little bit of literacy through like some documentation, some books. And again, the books aren't really being promoted like they were once upon a time, but something like lightning fast websites, which is the course that you put together and that web page test catch point released, is hopefully going to get you to start to understand what performance is all about, because it's once again not what it used to be years ago, which was like, oh, I have the stopwatch, click click. It's
Right.
far beyond that. I mean, in fact, let's just sort of like bring that up here. I'm going to share my screen again, and bingo. So I dropped the link in the chat, but I'll drop it again so that people can actually um, on it and sign up. It is for free. And this is something again that we were very adamant about, being able to provide this course for free so that people, you could finish this easily on a weekend. If you're a super keener, you could finish it in a day, I'd say on a Saturday or something like that.
Just
Uh,
gotta set that speed to like 2x or whatever.
oh, come on now. You want to take it all in slowly. You know what I said once? If I ever record a course or a podcast, I'm going to set it to like 0.5x. So when you speed it up, you'll have no choice but to hear me in like regular speed.
I like that.
Thank you. But yeah, the course is there. Go check it out. Again, it's for free. Lightning Fast Web Performance by Scott Jehl, who's our guest. He referenced this blog post that he talked about. He referenced this blog post that he wrote yesterday. Pardon me. There it is, right there. Go give it a read. Take your time. It'll take a little bit of time to go through, but it's one that's been well discussed in socials right now. I understand Hacker News has been having a very spirited debate about some of the details here, but again, between this and the actual Hacker News replies, have been great content. Actually, I read a
I'm
lot of it last
impressed.
night, so it brought up a lot of discussions. Um, I do want to remind folks that Scott will be speaking at an event apart in November, in Denver in October. Uh,
Denver.
yeah, I know, right? I was just completely just confused there. October 10th and 12th. So if you're in the area, definitely go and check them out. And I forgot to mention, actually, the same dates, I'll be in New York at Smashing
Oh,
Conference.
nice.
Also speaking, and I knew I'd forgotten a slide. I was like, dope. So I wanted to mention that very quickly. So for those of you who are in the area on the East Coast and are interested in a great conference, and what will be an entertaining talk, the one that I'll provide, please go check it out. Actually, I'll drop the link in the chat here as well.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, again, Scott, I want to thank you for your time. Let's just summarize what we've done today. This
Yeah.
was another edition of WebPage Test Live, folks. We try to have these as much as possible on Thursdays, where we talk about WebPage Test. We'll have esteemed guests with us today. We had Scott, and obviously, if you want to get using WebPageTest, you can start a free account. If you go to webpagetest.org, and you'll get in tune with what we've just talked about, the ability to, in a very sort of readable fashion, look at metrics, at some of the top sites or even some of the more sort of middle of the road sites that are out there. But again, in order to understand performance, I think you need to sort of use the tools out there that are exposed some of the challenges that are out. We talked about our appearance at Perf Now. So if you go to
Mhm.
perfnow.nl, they have a few tickets left and they're moving very fast. So please go check that out. Um, Lastly, I want to end it like this. We talked about the course, and I want to see if you had a particular additional suggestion that might sort of complement your course beautifully. That it might be a blog post that people could go out and read, or maybe a book that you feel would be a great sort of addition to anyone taking your course. Did you have any suggestions in mind?
Wow. Kind of put me on the spot there because I'm
Oh,
thinking of a bunch, but you know, uh, I think, from like a book's perspective, anything in the A Book Apart
okay.
family, um, particularly
Say it.
there are a few new ones about JavaScript, from Matt Marquis and yeah, I mean, several other books that those are all really good, like performance related, I think, even if they don't necessarily say it in the title. Um, so I would definitely recommend checking those out. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then I don't know, I might have to drop a few links in afterwards.
No problem. I mean, I'll ping you about that. And you are correct about the book apart. I remember buying a few, just for like two chapters,
Hmm.
because I knew they would have like content. and yeah, they do have they've grown the library tremendously over the years. I think it's like
Yeah.
probably in the
Yeah.
50s.
Definitely.
Um,
Oh, I just thought of another, actually. Our friend Harry Roberts
mhm,
just released a shorter course. I think it's a little more focused on developer tools,
mhm.
Chrome in particular, I think. Oh, there's the doorbell.
Okay,
And I'd recommend checking that one out, as like, once you say you took this course and you're looking for something that's a deeper dive, or you're already ready for that. Harry will have that in that course. So that looked really good. I haven't
cool.
taken it yet, but I intend to as well.
All right, all right. Let me not keep you from that door,
Yeah, you'll see who
because
that is.
yeah,
That's my cue.
absolutely.
I gotta
So
go. Thanks for having me on.
certainly, Scott. Thank you as always. We'll catch you soon. So feel free to sign off. Actually, I guess I have to take you out just like that, folks. Thank you for attending. And once again, he sort of made some suggestions there. The A Book Apart series, they do have a number of sort of books that do sort of cover performance sort of on the periphery. So go through their library and see. I'm going to suggest one real quick. This one right here. This URL, hpbn.co, it stands for High Performance Browser Networking. Ah, I blanked out for a second. It's a book by Ilya Grigorik that came out a few years ago, and it basically goes through the fundamentals of browser networking. What is it like to sort of, what happens when you hit enter after putting a URL in? And it's a fantastic book. It's been out for a number of years, but it's one that many of us consider very fundamental in understanding performance. And if you go to that URL right there, it's actually a free version. You can read it online in its entirety for free. So definitely go check that out. That being said, once again, we want to thank you very much for attending, sitting through this great conversation with Scott Jehl with regards to his brand new course. I'll once again mention that it is available for free. So sign up, and you'll be able to sit back through a weekend and go through it. The reviews have been awesome so far. And we certainly do want to let you know that if you do have any questions about the course itself, you could always tweet us at Real WebPageTest, where we'll answer any questions about the course and anything ideally around WebPageTest. You could also find Scott on Twitter at Scott Jehl. He's pretty active, and will also help answer any questions with regards to its course and WebPageTest. And lastly, you can find me as well on Twitter, where I'm relatively active as well. And I'll do my best to help you out with his course, and of course, anything related to WebPageTest, and anything related to the community events that we have planned throughout the rest of the fall and at conferences. That being said, thank you very much, folks. Thank you for sitting back and having this sort of fireside chat with Scott. And we'll catch you on the next show very soon. Look out for an announcement about that. Thank you very much, and have yourself a great day. Cheers.